Landscape Equipment and Agricultural Fairness, also known as the LEAF Act. I mean, come on! It's the LEAF Act. Who made that? Who did that?
They did that.
They did, and good for them. Welcome to I Like Batteries, the show where we explore the world of batteries. I'm Mike Muldoon.
And I'm Jeff Lynch. Good evening, Mike. How are you?
It is. Good evening. Good evening. We were on a good morning route, and now we're on a good evening route. It's getting colder, and mind you, I will say, you know what's coming up this weekend, Jeff?
I think there's a certain clock event,
there's a clock,
which most people pluralize or use the plural, and it's technically not correct, and it's one of my little pet peeves.
Okay, go with that. I'm more than happy to entertain that tonight.
Yeah, sure. So daylight saving time, and we put the clocks back.
Correct.
But many people call it daylight savings.
As in there's more than one.
It's not plural. I'm sorry. It just doesn't work that way.
But what is interesting about this is technically it is the longest day because we're actually going to get 25 hours.
If you do the clock calculation, yes.
Yeah. That's what I'm going. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll grant you that. It's going to get darker. Yeah, it's going to get darker. So that's not good. And if it gets darker, you know what happens? I have to use more batteries to keep more lights on. And it is getting colder, although it's going to be warm later in the week. And I don't know what's going on there, but it's going to happen. And I'm excited because the battery shed is doing really well. The Wave 2 is doing excellent. I mean, it's doing some great heating. So I preheat the shed in the morning just to make sure that if it does get cold, the solar is able to charge. And everything's running well. But, you know, Jeff, I have a couple batteries in the shed, but I don't have as many batteries as China.
Well, I think you might need a little more acreage.
I might, and I might need a lot more batteries. And what we're talking about here, folks, is the wonderful about Visualize Capitalist, and we've been on their page before. It's really kind of a cool site if you want to look at it. They had countries with the most battery capacity, and clearly, since you are listening to I Like Batteries, and thanks for joining us for another episode, I thought this was really an awesome visualization, and I didn't realize, Jeff, that China has 48.6% of the total installed battery capacity at 27.1 gigawatts of battery storage. That's a lot.
That is a lot. That's a lot of flux capacitors. But the U.S., although behind by quite a bit at 15.8 gigawatts and 28.3% of the world capacity. It trails off quite quickly after that, though.
Significantly. No, I know. Great Britain at 3.6 gigawatts, 6.5% of the world capacity. Australia's coming in next at 1.8 gigawatts at 3.2%. And it says rest of world is 3 gigawatts. And they are breaking down rest of world in a couple of other countries, which aren't contributing that much. What really one of the ones on there with low capacity that surprised me, honestly, was Canada.
Oh, see, I was going to be surprised by Japan.
Yeah, I guess so. But Canada, maybe we're thinking of two different things. You thought Japan, technology wise, and
I think in cars mostly.
Yeah, in cars. Okay, but Canada's pretty big, and so at 0.4 gigawatts or 0.7% of the world capacity, I guess I just assumed maybe they had more installed capacity, given the fact of some remote areas and different things there. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
it's a cool graphic, by the way. Reminds me a little bit of a certain battery app that used to exist.
Oh yeah, that's back in the day. It's a little bit of fruit juice there. Is that
a little bit? That reminds me of the icon for fruit juice.
Fruit juice icon. But I think the U.S. is going to catch up with some battery capacity, given the fact we might have some air taxis in the future. Have you heard about this, Jeff?
I have, yes. We were talking about this in pre-show. It's funny how these things work. Back in 2022, in the battery report, 2022, from, I forget, I got to scroll at the top, from the Volta Foundation, which we've talked about a few times in the past, but not as much recently. But back in 2022, in their report, they were talking about how the FAA released the airworthiness criteria for electric aviation. And now we came across this article about air taxis and other electric-powered aircraft cleared for takeoff, with the final rules are now in place for what they refer to as quote-unquote powered lift vehicles, which is a new category of aircraft. And the last new category was helicopters in 1940.
Right. Of which, I essentially think of these as a similar type of aircraft, although I'm not familiar. But the fact is that they're completely battery powered makes a difference in terms of emissions. And I think that's where a lot of people are going with this, is that you're not going to have to worry about emissions in cities and different areas versus I'm not actually sure how much emissions a helicopter gives off. But
I'm not quite sure. Helicopters are also referred to commonly as rotary wing aircraft.
Oh, fair enough. Well, these definitely from Joby have quite a bit of rotary wings. I mean, the ones we're looking at have at least 4 to 5, in terms of getting enough lift that's in there for as well. But, you're seeing more and more things move over to batteries because people, obviously, as we know, being a battery podcast, batteries are more prevalent. People want less carbon emissions. And a couple episodes ago, we talked about how California did that. But interesting enough, with a little research, there's more places than just California, Jeff, that are looking to get rid of carbon emissions from, let's say, two-stroke engines or different things. And this was surprising when we found this from Rural Lifestyle Dealer. Yeah. Were you blown away by how many places are like, no more?
I was, yeah, especially since this particular page we came across, I thought Mike was just sending me one article. But this particular page lists all of the articles from many different states and cities going back to 2022, 23.
Yeah. And
there are quite a few. And there's Mike and I noted an interesting difference where primarily some of them were talking about leaf blowers specifically, but others were actually talking about gas-powered lawn equipment, which is obviously a much broader category.
Yeah. And I think we look at all these things and say, we're getting rid of these. And I guess the leaf blowers make sense because they are fairly loud. I think that's A, right?
That's number one.
And B, we didn't realize in the last episode how much gas was actually spilled when people fill in.
Yes.
And that blew my mind. But it is this part that they cause a lot more emissions because they're essentially unregulated. And we were saying this. So you go and you take your car in and they look at it and they say, okay, well, how much they don't even have to put what they used to call the sniffer is how they used to do it to check to be able to see, are you having the right amount of emissions? Now it just goes through your port in the car and they figure out if there's a problem or check engine light. But this doesn't happen. People don't inspect this. And there's a lot of carbon emissions that are going out. So a lot of these municipalities are saying no go for lawnmowers, no go for leaf blowers, and no go for chainsaws, Jeff. And that surprised me because you need a lot of torque and a lot of power to operate a chainsaw. We're getting into that season in New England where with snow, with ice, you tend to have some limbs come down. You have to, usually do that. And I was surprised that was happening, but also what surprised me is the number of battery-powered chainsaws that are now out there.
Flooding the market, as it were.
Yeah. I don't want to say that with all the flooding going on, but I get where you're going with that. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, perhaps I misspoke.
Yeah, perhaps. That's right. Yeah. But there are quite a bit of chainsaws, and by brands that I didn't even know had battery-powered things. And one was one you picked up on, right? For sure.
Yes. So a big name, Husqvarna in the chainsaw world. if you hire some tree people, they will most likely have a Husqvarna, a suite of Husqvarna chainsaws, the orange and gray ones, if you will. They have many more battery-powered chainsaws than I expected them to have. They are roughly twice as expensive as their gas-powered equivalents, topping out at about $1,100.
Yeah,
for an 18-inch bar chainsaw. But I mean, if it's your business, then for sure you're going to need more than one battery for that.
Oh, absolutely. Because I have a Ryobi chainsaw, and the bar on mine is only about 16 inches, but I've used it up north when I've had some trees come down and different things, and it does a great job. And I have a 4 amp hour battery that does pretty well to kind of cut some things up, but I do have to replace. I have a 5 amp hour, but obviously the larger the battery, the more weight that it's adding. Good old friends at Harbor Freight. Now, one of my favorite stores. I mean, it's kind of like if you like tools, you're a kid in a candy store. If you go into Harbor Freight, they actually have one that's called their Atlas. That's an 80-volt brushless cordless 18-inch chainsaw with the tool only for $139.99. That wasn't bad. And I did look up to be able to take a peek. About the same price, $139.99 for an 80-volt 2.5 amp hour lithium-ion battery that would power that as well.
Okay, that's not too bad. I know my Ego chainsaw also has a 16-inch bar, and I have the 2 5 amp hour batteries and a 2.5 amp hour battery. And the nice thing about a battery chainsaw, or one of the nice things, two that I can think of off the top of my head, when people think about batteries and like, oh, they don't run as long as gas. Well, how much time do you actually spend cutting?
Right.
And that's the big difference. So with a gas powered one, you're going to start it up and you're going to leave it running. You're going to make a couple cuts. You're going to put it down, and most likely you're not going to turn it off. And battery powered ones just keep going for quite a bit longer. I mean, probably still less than the overall cutting time if you actually shut off the engine every time. But I did find out that a single 2-stroke engine, according to Discover magazine from 5-ish years ago, single 2-stroke engine produces pollution equivalent to that of 30 to 50 4-stroke automobiles.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Which like with those statistics, you're like, okay, for every leaf blower that's in my neighborhood.
Yeah. No, I mean that's a great point, and I didn't realize that. But in some ways, I do think of it, and you and I have probably used them for a fair amount of time. You pretty much smell like the engine, like whatever you're wearing. You pretty much know that it's like you can't wear, like, hey, should we go out to dinner afterwards? Yeah, not with these clothes,
right.
because you just completely smell like the emissions that are coming out of it. And so, yeah, I mean, they're definitely not good, but they were used for so many years, and now that we have an alternative with battery powered tools, I think this is great, and it is better for the planet. You can obviously recharge them. I pretty much recharge all my 40 volts in the battery shed, so usually
off solar.
Yeah, my Delta is charging, and then I'll charge that, and I do have a DC to DC charger, so I can be able to charge the 40 volts rather than having to go AC to
That's
DC.
Good. Yeah, I guess maybe we should mention, because we don't know the experience of our listeners that intimately, I should say, that a 2-stroke engine, when you put the fuel in, you actually mix oil in with the fuel.
True.
So that's why often you'll see 2-stroke engines, they'll smoke a lot because sometimes you put a little too much oil in the mixture. So there's this sort of little bit of art, a little bit of science going on with fuel mixtures in your 2-stroke equipment that was much more prevalent when Mike and I were growing up.
Yeah, no, agreed. And you're not getting that with battery powered ones. And so I think that's an awesome thing to be able to have. And we talked about the John Deere and how that you've got now really big lawnmowers to be able to do this. I did actually see that they're starting to actually get log splitters that are now battery powered as well.
Oh, interesting.
Or I mean, your alternative always could be that you can have electric log splitters that are there and just say plug it into an EcoFlow or a Bluetti or plug that in.
If it has enough power, no.
Oh boy, yeah. Did you?
I did not follow up. No, I haven't had a chance to call them yet. Yeah. Or I was going to send an email to EcoFlow support about that, but I needed to get more data off of the hydraulic pump for my QuickJack's car lift system.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about. Jeff and I were talking about. He tried to use his jack and it didn't quite work, and it's a good learning point for some of our listeners. And maybe you're thinking we're coming to the holiday season, so Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and you're starting to see previous generations of EcoFlow, previous generations of Goal Zero, previous generations of Bluetti, previous generations of Jackery being highly discounted as they get their new line out. You do want to pay attention to the continuous output in terms of wattage and the surge output. I would say you're in a safe zone if it's 1600 watts continuous, but that's a larger, obviously, power station.
Larger. Mm-hmm.
And then surging up to 2000. Because essentially that's where you're going to get out of it, what I would say a single outlet or a single breaker in your home, right? So you get your equivalent to that. So that should cover you almost all the time. Right? But it's those in-between power stations where you're like, well, what am I going to get for my surge capacity versus continuous, and how am I going to use it? So it's a good point, because you might plug something like that. Maybe you have an old compressor that you're plugging into that, and that would be something else that you would see that larger surge when the compressor kicks on and you're trying to use it as well. So just food for thought for folks when you're looking at those things. And it's this time of year where people are
actually, speaking of chainsaws,
go for it.
So in this whole EcoFlow thing, it made me think of it. We moved into this new house in January, and we're have some trees and lots of some woods. And instead of getting out a ladder, we were thinking about getting a pole chainsaw.
I have one.
Right. So then they come gas powered. They come plug-in electric and battery powered. I'm actually considering getting the plug-in electric and using the EcoFlow as the power source, because it would be a larger capacity than any of the batteries you would attach to the smaller chainsaw. These bars are usually like 10 or 12 inches long, sort of reaching up and doing limbs and such. So that's what I'm thinking, because I think it might actually save me some money.
I definitely think it'll save you some money. And that's what I'm saying. That is that alternative to look at. For that application, fine. I think for something like a lawnmower, for something like a leaf blower.
Oh, no, you're going to need something bigger.
Yeah, probably not. What I did get, though, it came in, but I have to go to Home Depot to get it. We have two large maples in the front yard and a really big oak. And so I get a ton of leaves. And I've got my Ryobi, essentially leaf mulcher. So it's
yes. I have a similar one, yes.
Okay. But then there's a company called The Works that actually has this, what I would call looks like a bowl that you actually just dump the leaves in, and it shreds
what I have
into one of the bags. Oh, that's what you have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And being the crafty person I am, it comes with this crappy little stand. So and so what we did was, instead of messing with bags or whatever, because we can compost ours or whatever once they're chipped up like that, I have an old just a regular trash can, and it had a scrap piece of I don't know, 1/2 or 3/4, 3/8 inch MDF. So I created a hole that fits the Works leaf shredder, and then it basically supports itself on top of the garbage can. So that's how I run the leaf shredder. So you just put everything in, it shreds it, and it dumps into the trash can. Then you can just drag the trash can out and dump it in your compost pile.
So you have the Works one.
I do.
This is excellent. We did not talk about this.
No, we did not. Yes.
This is how this show goes. So, but what we're going to see is, and I don't know if you've done this yet, I'm going to see if I can run it off my EcoFlow.
I will check this week, because we have plenty of leaves to shred.
Oh, this is we
will let you know in episode 218.
I love when we do this really well, that we've got good follow-up for the next episode.
I'm going to put it in the notes right now, Mike.
You're going to put it in the notes. Good to put in notes so we don't forget to be able to follow up with this, folks. And, as we said, I think here we are, multiple episodes, over 200 episodes into the I Like Batteries podcast. We appreciate you joining us, and we know we can we thank you very much as our listenership has grown and grown and grown. Jeff and I were looking at our statistics, and it's amazing how many new listeners we have, how many unique listeners we have growing all the time. And back when we started, we did not think that we'd be able to talk about batteries for as long as we have, and clearly it continues to become a larger and larger ecosystem of, products that are powered, cars that are powered, houses, air taxis, and all these type of things. So we enjoy it. We love talking about it. Hopefully you enjoy listening to it, and we love it for you to join us. And join us next time, because we will have a follow-up of whether you can run something that's plug-in off of your portable power station. So stay tuned. Hopefully you have a great week. Stay fully charged, or at least 80%.